I'd rather move a little bit slower on the front side to get the right people to have success long term. And I think that's really important.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. I am really excited. I have Shelley Fasano, CEO of Dymotek, on today. Shelley, thanks so much for joining me.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, Shelley, it's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
We are a custom injection molding facility. We make plastic parts, thermoplastic and liquid silicone rubber. We started actually back in the late 90s. The two owners were privately held by two brothers, Steve and Tom Troop, invented a under the pipe cover for handicapped people. The state of Connecticut passed a law saying you had to protect the pipes under the sink. You could meet the requirement by wrapping insulation and duct tape around the pipes, but it didn't look very pretty. Yeah. So they developed a product and went to market. And then the federal ADA law passed. So they had 20 patents on the product and were first to market. And that's how the company started.
And that's how the company started. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom.
There you go.
That's really cool. And, now here we are, almost 100 employees still in the business, up in Ellington and Summers, and still at it. But a lot of changes over that period of time. I think oftentimes I start the show by sort of understanding the person's background. Sure. But I think it would be kind of cool if we go through the history of the company, because it's got a new name, Dymotek, now than it used to have, and it's got a really interesting story. And then you'll kind of come into it, along the way. So, I mean, look, as somebody whose knees can bump into those pipes underneath, I certainly appreciate having it there. But let's just sort of talk a little bit about how this thing got started. So, first of all, what caused them to want to create this product in the first place? Anticipating the law? Was there some reason they felt the need to have it?
I think they both had affiliation with plumbing. They had plumbing history. So they were familiar with the industry. They knew the law was coming for the state of Connecticut. And they're like, hey, let's do something to help make this easy for installation and look nice. So then with the federal ADA passing, it was perfect timing.
Yeah, well, listen, better to be lucky than good, or right place, right time. But yeah, that's really cool. So, I mean, one of the things I found super interesting when we were sort of talking about the company is that, he had somebody who invented something, but they didn't just go and sort of bootstrap it with themselves trying to run the company. They hired a professional CEO. Can you sort of talk through that story and maybe the why?
Sure, yeah. So when they started and developed the product, they both had full-time jobs. This was like their side business. So they didn't necessarily have the capacity to be starting a whole new manufacturing facility, and they didn't have a manufacturing background. So they're incredibly bright gentlemen, and they're like, let's hire an expert. So they brought on Norm Forrest, who revamped the manufacturing facility, bought the first press, set up all new processes, and really started launching the manufacturing facility.
So did Norm retired fairly recently?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and you're the new Norm.
I am.
New and improved, Shelley. New and improved.
Thank you.
So when he got there, they had just sort of been doing it like. How were the prototypes made?
They were outsourcing. So they had another manufacturing company that was making the parts. And I think they went to visit that facility and noticed a ton of product in the dumpster that was scrap and bad. And they're like, we can do this better. And they started the search and found Norm, and Norm started. So when Norm started the company, there was no building.
Right.
They had to revamp from the ground up, put in power, electricity, everything, new floors, lighting, presses, everything.
Get it all started. Mm-hmm. And so, man, that's got to be some confidence in your product to be like, hey, did they already have orders?
Yes. So they were working their full-time jobs, coming to the office after work and packaging and mailing them out.
Really?
And they couldn't keep up. It was very busy. So we still manufacture that. We don't own the product line anymore, but we still manufacture for a plumbing distribution house down in Tennessee, and that cell runs 24/7. We make over 2,500 sets a day. There are a lot of sinks.
There are a lot of sinks, and new sinks being installed every day.
All the time.
Fortunately, that's really cool. So that was another interesting part. So the company, when it first started, was called
Trubro.
Trubro.
Yeah. So we're owned by Steve and Tom Trube. It's their last name, and then Bro for brothers. Trubro.
Trubro. There you go. So Trubro gets started, and then for how long are you guys just making that product?
Not for a very long time. Norm was insightful and realized that at the beginning anyway, it didn't take full. We weren't running 24/5, and molding machines are made to run and not stop. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I need to get other business to help keep the presses running when the volume declines on the Trubro parts. So he was a processor by trade and went to other mold builders in the area and said, hey, if you build a mold, I can test it for you and develop a process before you hand it off to your customers. So that's how we started getting other business in, and we did such a good job testing and qualifying the mold that the customers kept it there for us to run.
Oh, what an ingenious idea. So pretty quickly realizing that the best way to be profitable on these machines is you got to keep them running.
Exactly.
So finding other ways to run, got creative. And so what was sort of the trajectory? Because I know eventually the Trubro product was sold.
Yes. So they really started manufacturing in the early 90s, 93, 94 at our own facility. And by 2004, the volumes had grown to a part where we're like, I'm not sure if we're the best to continue growing it, right? We were a smaller facility. We didn't necessarily have the sales force. So we started, I wasn't there at the time, but they started talking to other plumbing experts, let's say, and we connected with a company down in Tennessee who bought the product line and the product name, which caused us to change our name from Trubro to Dymotek.
Got it. And so, but you said you guys are still making it. So kind of like walk me through the...
So we are, they bought the product line, but at the time they weren't a manufacturing facility. They have developed a manufacturing facility now, but we have the expertise in the product. We've been making it for a really long time. So we make it and ship it to their warehouse, and then they distribute it to all their customers. And
the idea there was they've got sort of a bigger reach, a bigger sales force.
Absolutely.
To kind of move so that and have taken the product. So over the last 20 years, has it continued to grow?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And just so I'm clear, it's that like white sort of fitted molding that I see like all the time around.
It's amazing how many bathroom sinks I look under these days.
Fair point. So just curious on the product itself, is it like custom for every, like how does it?
It's so most P-traps and water valves are the same. Their height, I don't know if that's the right term, but their height may change. So we have an easy tear feature that all you have to do is, anybody can do. You just tear it off and adjust how it fits on the sink. It comes pre-loaded with fasteners. So once you fit it around the sink, you close it on the fasteners, and they're tamper resistant. So once it's closed, you can't open it.
Yeah.
And it covers. There you go.
Yeah, certainly gets the job done. But that's super cool. So they buy the product. Obviously, they don't want you to now be also operating as Trubro. So where does Dymotek come from at that point then? So
they had gone on a search asking employees for different ideas on how to come up with a name. They need a new name. What's going to be catchy? What makes sense? And one of the owner's daughters came up with Dynamic Molding Technologies, which we liked, but they wanted to shorten it. So Dynamic Molding Technologies became Dymotek.
There you go. It's a great name, you know, and it's sort of cool that once you know what it is, it sort of describes the business, but it's not one of those like kitschy names where you sort of feel like it got forced.
Right.
And you spelled it with a K too. So it's not even like the tech, it's pretty neat, and it has a cool history. So in 2004, when they saw off the product line, how much percentage of the business was it? Because that's, just thinking about from a business standpoint, it's a sort of really interesting pivot. Your name of the business is tied to the name of the product.
Right.
The product I know from what you'll share, but I know is a big part of the revenue. It's a brave move.
Yes. So it was, I'm going to say, I don't know the exact numbers, but between 50 and 75%. It was a very large number. And I think, and again, I wasn't here at the time, but in my opinion, that probably helped. Obviously, we got significant cash flow that helped us expand the building. We bought a brand new ERP system. We definitely invested in some technology, which was needed. And it allowed us to change our name to kind of not be so focused on Trubro. Like, we're not just the plumbing company. Now we have this diverse background. We could do lots of different things.
Yeah, it's a brave move. And so when you look at the business now, how does it look different than it did in 2004?
Very different. So we're now in 2 facilities. We outgrew the Ellington facility, and we added a second facility in Summers. We have diversified, so now that Trubro line is a much smaller part of our business. We've gotten into medical. We added a ton of technology that's been really excited in automation. Just as a side note, when we started the Trubro business, it took 5 operators to make a part. We'd have to pull the part from the press. We'd have to add in the pegs. You'd have to pack it. It was 2 different molds, 2 different presses. We've invested in new presses, 6-axis robots, some feeder bowls, and now 1 operator does that same product.
Really?
Yes.
That's a lot of automation.
So, it gave us some flexibility to do some of that investment. So we got into liquid silicone rubber, which is a different kind of molding. And we were probably one of the first 10 companies in the world that did thermoplastic and silicone in the same mold space. So being a super small company, we were able to be dynamic and really invest in some technology that a lot of smaller companies don't have the opportunity to do.
Yeah, that's really, so it's a really great case study to say, hey, we had this great product. So many businesses run that kind of to the ground, or the sort of traditional story. Hey, you maybe create some tangential products, we'll sell some new colors. You sort of think about these little ancillary add-ons, but this business went in a totally different direction and said, what can we do to take this thing, which maybe we're on its course, maybe has an opportunity to grow somewhere else, take the cash and then invest to make it so much better. It's really a fascinating approach.
Steve and Tom are really amazing. I think they're entrepreneurials, but they're like, I'm not business. I don't want to run a business, right? So many entrepreneurials then want to run the business, and they tend not to be good at the details that you need to run a business. They're not the number people and all the process people and all the rules. And
I resemble that remark. Yeah.
So they were like, hey, we're inventors. We come up with ideas. Let's focus on that. And then let's let other people do the stuff that they're good at.
Yeah. Listen, that's a genius move. What are they involved in? So I guess I never got to this question even before the show, so I'll learn this myself. Are they in the business now?
They still own the business. I meet with them on a regular basis, probably twice a month, telling them how we're doing, go over financials, big picture topics. But day-to-day business, they leave it up to the management team.
Did they ever work in the business? Sort of the way, sort of like 9 to not 9,
They come into the building almost every day,
sure, of course.
But no. In my role there, they've never been involved in the day-to-day stuff, going to production meetings every day, or
really.
They're actively involved in infrastructure activities. So we recently added on to our clean room. Tom Trube took the lead in working with the contractors and coming up with the design, or if we have a facility issue, they're great at taking the role and helping with that. But we need a new pickup truck. They're gonna find that for us.
Care of that. Got it.
But the day-to-day stuff, nope. They're like, you guys are the experts. You handle it.
Wow, that's genius. And so talk a little bit. Well, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Let's talk about how you got involved in the business, because we're getting past down the line here. So just, I understand that they hired you on as a consultant.
They did, yes. So back in mid 2005 and 6, my husband and I started a consulting business, really focusing on ISO standards and improving quality management systems. And Norm Forrest, who was the previous CEO, and Victor Mirando, who had been working there, both my husband and I worked with at a previous company. So they knew of us, they trusted us, and they were like, hey, come help us. Mm-hmm. So we went in for about 6 months and did some consulting work, and I loved the culture. I loved the products they were making and how things were going, and they offered me a job, and I stayed.
Bada bing. There you go. Yeah.
Frank went off and started another job, my husband, and they offered him a job probably 2 years later. So my husband and I have worked together for most of our marriage. It's how we met. We met at work. So
well, then so you met there and that worked. Might as well keep it together, I guess. Yeah.
So he's no longer there, but we worked together for a large portion of my time there.
That's great. So you came in to sort of help do some ISO and process improvement consulting, and when you went on full time, were you doing sort of production management?
That's exactly it. Yep. So I really started focusing on scheduling the production floor, managing operations, working with customer service, understanding the flow between customer orders and getting scheduling and getting the parts out the door. So it was like a big picture. It was a great job. I loved that role. It was small and we were smaller then, so you can kind of do it all.
Yeah.
Now that we've grown so much, you kind of have to parse that out.
Yeah. Listen, there's pros and cons in both worlds, right? For sure. So after you started running that, how was your career trajectory?
So I stayed in the operations role for several years, and that we added the second facility, and I helped get that up and running and did some really large production launches, which helped us double our sales in a short period of time. So it was really exciting. And then I want to say 2019-ish, our controller left. So I did have a finance background, and they're like, hey, can you help us out and kind of dive into finance? And I'm like, sure, I haven't done that in a while, but let's dive in.
Let's get it.
So it was nice to become intimate with the numbers of the organization and how we were doing financially. And it was the perfect prequel to the CEO role. So
100%. I mean, I'm following the career, and I think it's interesting. You were talking about before what you loved about that sort of production management role was getting to sort of see the business sort of soup to nuts operationally. And I bet once you get into the controller, now you're seeing it soup to nuts sort of on a spreadsheet. So it's interesting to see the same thing from two different perspectives.
Absolutely.
I imagine.
I know. If only I was an engineer, I could have the trifecta.
And so from controller to where?
CEO.
Mm-hmm. Bada bing.
There we are.
And do you think that that was sort of was that a discussed plan, or how did you?
It was not a discussed plan. I think Norm had made the decision to retire. He wanted to enjoy life, and I wish him well, and he's so fantastic.
He'd been at it for almost 30 years.
Yes, he deserves every moment.
Yeah, it wasn't like he just gave it a short shrift here. Yeah.
So I think it was like, now's the time. And then there were several internal conversations, and Steve and Tom are like, Shelley, we'd like you to be the one. So I was very honored and excited, and it's been a wild ride.
I mean, just curiosity here. Was there like a formal process that they went through? Was it more like sit down at a meeting and out of the blue, and they're like, hey, Shelley, we've been thinking about it, and the Norm's retiring, and then like, how did it go down?
Yeah, it was kind of like that.
Kind of like that. When you know, right? I mean, that's how it goes.
I don't think they didn't start like a interview process. They weren't looking outside. They really wanted to having someone hit the floor running, who understands the business, who knows the players, that matters. So it was, they wanted to kind of keep it in-house, and they selected me. I was very honored.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you said it before, it's almost like when you think of your background and your experience in the business, it's almost like, feels like this was the plan from the beginning, right?
It is. I'm grateful for the experience I had when I started in job right after college in plastics. I was in the finance role. I did payables and receivables and was kind of on a track to take over the finance role in that organization. And the VP of finance at the time, Sandy Rokas, who's been a mentor and very bright at the time, said, if you're going to run the finances of a manufacturing company, you need to understand manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So they sent me down to Kentucky. We had a facility in Kentucky that it was just starting up. And then we're like, hey, learn it.
Make it happen, Shelley.
So, which was such an amazing opportunity. I really learned all about manufacturing in a safe environment, but really kind of feet to the fire, and loved the atmosphere and operations so much that when I came back, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I want finance anymore. Finance, there's such a cadence, right? There's monthly close and weekly closes and quarterlies and year end. And there's such a cadence in operations. I loved walking in and not necessarily knowing what you were walking into and solving problems. And you could see your results right away and really making an impact fast. And I loved that.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly, and for a lot of people that I know that work in finance, they really love that sort of predictability, and so it's really, I think it is unique to find somebody who can really have a passion for both, which you clearly do, because as you just noted, in operations role, man, it's like you don't know what,
No.
you don't know what you're going to get, day to day. But if you like sort of incoming problems and thinking creatively, it's really helpful. And I bet, and I'll ask this question, I bet you've found that the brain and the training you've had for the process in finance has been really helpful in solving manufacturing operational problems with that same process approach. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. Understanding with numbers, right? You got to get to the core. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Where's the data coming from? And to solve any problem, you need a good problem statement. You need to find really what your root cause is, or you're going down rabbit holes that aren't necessarily solving the problem. So really applying that, okay, what's our problem and how do we solve it? Sometimes you can do it with numbers, sometimes you need to do it with people, but it's a very similar process.
Yeah, and I wonder this too, like with the numbers, right? No one ever argues with sort of getting to the truth. But sometimes in the real world, right, or in operational world, people have a different approach. I bet you that sort of looking for the facts approach been super helpful.
Yes. Yeah, I'm grateful for the background that I've had. I really think it's helped me set me up for success now.
And how'd you get into sort of the ISO consulting? Because now you're just now to me, you're like rounding it out, right? You sort of have that finance process background. Now you know the operations, and then you layer on continuous improvement on top of that. It's like, so how did you get into that?
I think when I had gone to Kentucky to kind of learn operations, and I came back and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go into finance, right? That's not where I want to be. They wanted to obviously keep me in the organization, and where can we find a spot for her? And that's when QS 9000, the automotive standard, was really coming out. So they're like, hey, implement QS 9000 in our organization. So I worked with Victor Mirando. So there's lots of ties.
Yep.
And we worked together to implement the standard in the company at the time. And that's when I really got to understand. And again, the process, the problem statement, the detail behind launching something successful. And again, that rounds you out, right? So now I know how, like from beginning to end, following the rule, how do you handle non-conforming product? How do you identify material? How do you launch products? It kind of ties it all together.
It's amazing. And, there's a couple of things you've said along the way that really stood out to me, right? Like, you mentioned that you had a mentor in Sandy, who sort of helped you to find your path. So, you must have done something to engender that kind of belief, to have someone who not only helps you find your path, but when you say, hey, I think my path might be somewhere else, says, all right, well, let me help you get that done, which then sort of has helped you learn to help people find their way in a way that helps grow their career and benefit the business. And all this, have you taken sort of all those lessons and figured out a way to leverage that to sort of help at Dymotek, to pass that forward, to help people in the organization move around?
I'm trying. And I think because it comes a little bit naturally to me. Like, I always wanted to be a teacher. If I had a different path, I would have been a teacher. So I sometimes forget that teaching's not innate in some people because it's such a passion for me. So really breaking it down and showing people how you should bring other people along and teach them is really important. I was just having a conversation earlier that I'm a question asker, right? It's how I learn. I ask lots of questions. And I realized, I just thought everybody loved questions. Everybody wants to ask questions. And I've learned along the way that some people are insulted by asking questions. They feel like you're questioning their authority. They feel like you're undermining them, that you don't have faith in them. They're the subject matter expert. They shouldn't need to be questioned. Whereas me, ask me a question because it's my opportunity to teach and to share. So trying to get people to understand that questions are such a great thing, and it gives you such an opportunity to share your knowledge and to get everybody on board. But not everybody thinks the same way. It's shocking.
Yeah, exactly. You got those two problems, right? So you've got people that are resistant to having questions be asked, usually for the wrong, they have a wrong approach them. But then you got the other problem of people that don't feel comfortable asking questions.
Right.
And you got to deal with that too.
Exactly. So having safe environment, I think, is really important. I do roundtables every week with all the shifts. So, which is great because now I'm developing a relationship with them, right? So I've been doing these for 4 or 5 months.
Can you elaborate when you say you're doing roundtables with all the shifts?
So we have 6 shifts, right? 3 in Ellington, 3 in Summers. Once a week, I pull them off the floor for 25 minutes and ask them what's going well, what's not going well. I share what's going in the business, what's happening in the business, and what we can do different to make their job better. So my roundtables at the beginning were like crickets. No one said anything because you had to develop a safe environment and a sense of trust. Now my roundtables, I walk the floor and they're like, oh, when's our next roundtable? Which is so exciting to me. So they want the opportunity to be like, oh, if we just did this, it would be so much better. So having that now they're asking questions and now they're sharing information, and I get to ask questions about, well, what about this? And they're not getting that. Well, why are you asking questions, right? It's a full circle.
Right. It's a round table. So how long have you been doing it, and how long did it take to go from crickets to engagement?
So I started in October, so it's been just 4 or 5 months. And I would say full 3 months, it was really crickets, and some people had more questions. And I started by the first couple meetings was like, just share something. I don't know you. You don't know me. Let's just share something that has nothing to do with work. Tell me something about yourself. And I learned a ton of stuff, people like hiking. Someone has a turtle.
Someone has a turtle. Well, that's something. Sure.
So they just share something about themselves. And now it allows me to connect, right? So now I go to my next roundtable and I'm like, oh, you love outside sports. Have you been skiing lately?
Right.
And so you start developing those relationships, which are important.
Yeah, that's super important, which also means you're approachable, and that starts breaking down the stuff. And then,
Exactly.
And then I assume at some point you heard some feedback, and is one of the steps required to continue to build that trust that you take action on that feedback quickly?
Yes. And nothing happens fast enough.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
So patience, teaching patience and understand. They don't understand. They're like, this is a problem, fix it. And some things are easy. We just redid some bathrooms and they had no place to put lotion. I'm like, I can fix that.
Yes.
So I do that in the next 3 days and they're like, oh, thank you. Now they want to change how we handle our shift overlap. Well, that takes a little bit more time because there's training and there's communication, and then we have to hold people accountable and we have to follow up. But they'll see some activity. As long as they see movement, I think they buy in.
Yeah, and that's great. One of the things I've learned is if you can handle some of those simple things, right? Like we had hand dryers in the bathroom, and I thought, oh, this is a great thing. And then for one of the first pieces of feedback is like, we would prefer paper towels.
That was the same feedback
so we'll put back the paper towels, and and so there you go, right? But you got to just get on that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to circle back to something you've referenced a few different times, which was the 2 different facilities. And, I just, was sort of curious, how two facilities sort of really near to maybe not near walking distance, but Connecticut to Kentucky near, right? Relatively speaking, sort of why two facilities and is in such close proximity?
So we had outgrown our Ellington facility, which has been kind of our flagship facility, and we needed more space.
Yep.
And, there was the discussion, do we expand? Do we find a bigger space? What do we do? And cost effective, it made sense to find another location if we could nearby. So we found this location in Summers. It needed some infrastructure improvements. We invested some substantial money in there to get it to our level of standard that we wanted. But it made sense for us to abandon Ellington and buy one big facility. Actually, that just came up in one of my roundtables. They're like, can't we all be together? Which I love that they want to be together.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm like, Steve and Tom grew up in Ellington. It's kind of like our home base. I can't imagine ever not having that.
Right.
So we couldn't abandon that and have one big facility. So
there wasn't room in the Ellington spot to just sort of build on. Mm-hmm. So now, because they were like 15 minutes by car?
About 15.
Yeah. So pretty close. So then, the reason I brought it up is because going back to our conversations around efficiency and so forth, manufacturing, and especially people that are in manufacturing know that, two facilities is probably more than twice as hard, right? Just because, unless you've got one facility that does something totally different than the other one, you can't sort of share inventory. You can't, you can't, if you got a need to run something on another machine, it's like, it's not like send an email, right? You got to, it's just hard to get stuff from one place to another super efficiently. And so so that's a lot in one question, I guess, but sort of how do you do it?
Sometimes better than others.
Fair.
So there are some things that we've done right from the beginning that I think has helped. And one is we treat both facilities the same. So we have never run separate financials. So we're Dymotek. We're not Dymotek Ellington and Dymotek Summers. Yep. So we either succeed or fail together.
Yep.
So I think that helps us be one company and not two separate divisions, because I've worked for companies like that in the past. We have some shared resources, like we're not big enough to have two maintenance teams. We have one maintenance teams that jump between the buildings, and sometimes that can be really inefficient when you start in one building and move to another building and go back. My rule of thumb is try never to move back and forth between buildings more than once. We do have a box truck that we bring between buildings once a day. So the goal is get everything on the truck that you need. It's scheduled. It's this time every day. Get what you need on the truck and get it between the facilities and try and minimize that. Now, sometimes we miss it and we need something that's there and we need it here. But there's enough people back and forth. You can throw it in the back of your car and bring it over. But we try to plan ahead and be prepared.
So that kind of having it as one P&L, which sort of makes it one organization. You don't, sort of not competing over who get this expense here and the revenue there. I bet that probably helps. Does that bleed into the culture in a positive way?
Yes. The buildings are very different, and the people in the buildings sometimes don't like the operators. They're like, oh, it's different there than it is here. And some of it's just the work is different.
Right.
They're so used to what they do in one building. When they go to another building, it's new. New is harder and different.
Yeah, change.
So that sometimes is it. But sharing as many resources as we can, I think, is important. And being sensitive to how the two plants interact with each other is already important. Once a year, we bring everybody together. We have a holiday luncheon training and make sure we try and cross-train whenever we can. So operators in one building can work in another. We move people around and try and combinate whenever we can.
So it feels like one Dymotek, not two.
We work really hard.
Yeah. And how important is sort of having that sort of quality culture and unified culture to the business? In
today's labor market, it's critically important, and we work really hard on it. We could always do better. but we work really, really hard. So we have core values. We talk about them often. We have signs all over the organization. It's part of our review process. Like, do you meet our core values? If you do, it impacts your raise pretty substantially. If you don't, it negatively impacts you. It's part of our hiring process. So we screen on core values before we even do technical interviews. So if you don't mean core values, you could be the best in the world, but you're not going to get past that initial screening. So that's really important to us. It's challenging.
And you said it's sort of in today's hiring environment, it's so important. So it's interesting. You're sort of saying, hey, like, we're going to take you on who you are before what you can do. Why is that so important in an environment where I'm sure there's times you just wish you could just throw a body at something?
That's true. Yes. We do some really challenging things from a technology standpoint, and we have to work together. And I've worked in organizations where you get one person that doesn't work well with the team, and it can be so demotivating and can suck the life out of any sort of momentum that you have. And I'd rather move a little bit slower on the front side to get the right people to have success long term. And I think that's really important.
Do you think that pays off in some ways that you maybe forego some of the technical talent, but you get the team that works together? Does that pay dividends?
Long term, yes. Short term, it's really hard.
But worth it? Is the short term pain worth the long term gain?
Absolutely. We're always looking for the right technical people that fit our organization, and it's hard. But we have a great team. They're working really hard, and I think sometimes because we don't have the bodies that we need to get the work done, it puts strain on the people that are working there. And I'm very sensitive to that, right? So I appreciate the work that they're doing. They often say, they feel like they're sprinting a marathon, right?
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
I understand we can't sustain that long term, but I also know that getting in someone that doesn't support the direction we're going in will just hurt more than the benefit that we get from that extra body right now.
Yeah, that short-term gain is
Exactly.
just short-term gain. That's really awesome. And I know we're kind of coming up on time, Shelley, but I do want to ask you, just circle back to one thing. You talked about the value of the technology investments and the automation. And I just wonder, do you continue to keep investing in that? Because it just sounds like that's made such a difference in Dymotek's growth trajectory. And you told the story earlier about how a product that used to take 5 people now can take 1 person. And I think about, as other people might say, and the people that say own that product now, they think about, well, they would manufacture it themselves. You don't just have quote expertise, meaning you've been doing it for a long time. You have expertise in that you keep innovating to do it more and more efficiently, which then keeps you ahead of the pace. How do you keep that sense of move ahead alive in the organization?
We have a great team. So Victor Mirando is our big picture guy. He thinks so far outside of the box, which is what we need. He's the one that's always looking for the next best thing, which is fantastic. I tend to be a little bit more conservative, so he's the perfect offset to me. But he's involved in what's happening in the market. We have a great engineering team that is always looking to see what we could do to streamline. We have an automation group, which I think a lot of manufacturers don't have, but we have a team of 3 that really focus on automation and what we can do to improve processes and eliminate labor, and not people, just labor, because again, it's a limited market out there, and we're constantly struggling to find direct labor people to run jobs. So if we can reduce it somehow or make it easier in some way to keep people engaged, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that by now the idea that investing in technology and automation eliminates jobs has left the workforce because it's just been proven time and time again. The companies that don't invest in technology and automation, those jobs disappear.
Yes.
And the ones that do end up with more and more work and more jobs.
Right. And it's not an overnight process, right? We're in the process of launching a brand new product that should be in production late this year. And we're going to start with a manual process, right? Because we need to get into production.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
need to
yeah.
get it launched, right? And then, but we're designing the work cell knowing that we want to make improvements. We want to eliminate labor. We want to make it easier for the workforce. So it's a staged process. And when you have the right customers and you can have long-term contracts or long-term investment with your customers, then it makes the time, money, and energy to make those improvements worthwhile.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's really awesome, Shelley. And it's been really awesome hearing about Dymotek. And it just sounds like you're having a lot of fun doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Listen, let me just wrap up with a couple
Sure.
last questions. I think I already know the answer to this one, but if you had to do something other than be the CEO of Dymotek, and it could be anything in the world, what would you do?
Yeah, I would be a teacher.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I would be a teacher.
Like a high school? Like
Middle school, I think.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. Why middle school?
I think for me as a child, that age was so shaping, right? You don't know what you're doing. Your hormones are out of control.
Yeah.
And I had some really great teachers in that time frame that helped ground me that I'm like, oh, I think I could make an impact then.
Yeah, it's funny. I still remember a couple of teachers from like 7th and 8th grade. It's funny you bring that up. So is there something, Shelley, that you learned early in your life, early in your career that you think, what's something that you learned early in your career, early in your life that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
I think I wish I learned it earlier, but listening, right? I think so many times you want to know the answer or you want to be ahead of the game that you're not listening to what's happening right now, right? Like really engaged, really hearing what's happening. Sometimes I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next and I'm not engaged in listening. So take the time, listen. If you don't know the answer right away, it's okay.
Yeah, that's really helped you along the way. And what's something, Shelley, that if you could go back in time and tell young Shelley, and if she'd listen to you, you really think would have a huge impact on her life?
Explain what you do and why you do it, right? So very early in my career, again, I've always been someone to ask questions. And I didn't realize that people didn't like that. And so I remember having a job where later on, after I'd been there for a couple of years, they were like, oh, we hated you at first. We just thought you were questioning everything and, really saying, hey, have people understand who you are and what you're doing and not just assume everybody's like you. It's important.
Yeah, explain. That's really, really cool. Shelley, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
It's been great being here. Thank you.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.